I didn't want to go to war. Nobody does. But on a December morning in 1941, a voice came through the radio. That voice changed everything. You looked at your mother. She looked at you. Nobody said a word, because there was nothing left to say. I could imagine what was coming. I heard it on the radio, but the war didn't turn out the way I expected. That night, I couldn't sleep. I was too restless. The next morning, I got up early and went to the recruitment office. There was a long line, many people, all waiting to enlist. I joined that line and waited. After a long while, my turn came, and I signed up. I had grown up on the streets of Boston. I worked in a plastics factory. Sometimes I had dreams. Maybe one day I'll get married. Maybe I'll have children. But all of that was put on hold the moment that voice came through the radio. Maybe I would never dream like that again. Training began. It was fast, because the world was in a terrible state. The training was hard and relentless. The world wasn't going to wait for me. Our commanders pushed us constantly. They told us this war would be brutal. So I tried to give more than everything I had. I had brought almost nothing with me, only a photo of my mother. I held it and tried to draw strength from it. I had served before, but I had never been to war. I was strong. I adapted quickly. And then the day came. Our commanders handed us our gear and prepared us. On the morning of June 6, 1944, I boarded a boat headed for Normandy. Before we even reached the shore, the man next to me started vomiting. I looked at his face. There was no shame there. Nobody on that boat was ashamed, because everyone felt the same thing. There was a stone in my stomach and lead in my legs, and in that moment, I started to feel that all that training meant nothing here. The water rose to my waist. The weight was pulling me down. A man fell to my right. A man fell to my left. I wanted to look at them. I wanted to save them. But I couldn't look, because if I looked, I would fall too. I just kept moving, one step at a time. Bullets skimmed across the surface of the water, making a sharp, piercing sound. It almost felt like rain. But this rain killed people. I could see the beach, 50 meters away. I had to get there. But those 50 meters felt impossibly far. Finally, I reached the shore. I collapsed to the ground. I could barely breathe. A friend was next to me. A friend who always smiled. He kept a photo of his wife in his pocket. He asked me, "Are you alive?" I said, "I don't know." Then we looked at each other and smiled, just slightly, because there was nothing else we could do. 2 hours later, my friend was dead. A sniper took him with a single shot. They say people who die like that don't suffer. Maybe that's true. But I looked into my friend's eyes, and in that moment, I felt something close inside me. That door never opened again. Weeks passed in France, then months. War was no longer like a movie to me. There was no movie. There was only mud. Cold. Everything was soaked in mud. We moved from village to village, but by the time we arrived, the Germans were already gone. Sometimes we exchanged fire at street corners. A woman handed me bread. I was moved. I wanted to cry, but I didn't cry, because by then I couldn't cry anymore. Only 8 men remained in our squad. We had started with 14. Every morning when I woke up, I counted my friends. I asked, "Is everyone still here?" Because the only thing keeping me alive was my fellow soldiers. If everything was in order, we could face another day. Then we entered Paris. People came out to greet us. They gave us flowers. They wept. They tried to embrace us. We were treated like heroes. And I thought to myself, if I am a hero, then being a hero hurts very much. But I couldn't say that to anyone. In December 1944, we went to Bastogne, Belgium. The temperature was minus 20 degrees. My boots had cracked. The war wasn't going as planned. Winter gear never arrived. There was no logistics. The Germans surrounded us from all sides. At that moment, the German commander said, "Surrender." Our commander's reply was a single word: never. In that moment, I saw something clearly, really clearly, because that answer was exactly what I needed to hear right then. A hopeless situation, but a defiant refusal to give in. We all stayed where we were, freezing. starving, sleeping under German artillery fire every night. Do you know what I thought about most during those days? A warm bath. It seemed strange. But while bullets rained through the air, all I could think of was a warm bath. Sometimes the mind has to go somewhere else, because if you think about reality, reality will break you. The Germans retreated, and once again, I survived. But for me, Europe was over. The Pacific was just beginning. February 1945, Iwo Jima. I knew France. I knew Bastogne. But Iwo Jima was different. It was a place beyond imagination. A small island. But the ground was volcanic black sand. Japanese soldiers were everywhere. Underground tunnels stretched in every direction. The sound of gunfire never stopped. I stepped off the boat and onto the shore. But I stepped onto black sand. It wasn't like sand at all. It filled my boots and made every step harder. It felt like the island was trying to swallow me. And the worst part, we lost 5 men the first day, 7 men the second day. So many had been lost from our squad that I stopped counting the names of those who were left, because counting made the pain unbearable. Night fell. But nighttime was the worst. The Japanese were invisible during the day. But at night, they came out of their tunnel networks, silent, like shadows, slipping through the dark. If you fell asleep in that moment, you died. But if you didn't sleep, you lost your mind. I found a middle ground. I held my rifle in my arms and waited in a half-awake state. I had trained myself to wake at every sound. I no longer dreamed. Or maybe I did. But I couldn't remember. Maybe I didn't want to remember. One morning, as I was climbing out of my foxhole, the man next to me stumbled. I thought he was wounded. I called out, "Davis." No answer. I looked at the ground. No blood. He was just sitting there, leaning against the wall, eyes wide open. I was confused. Had he been shot? Had he collapsed from exhaustion? A heart attack? I didn't know. But it had happened, and I said goodbye to him without knowing why. We stayed on that island for 23 days, and the island fell, and then the moment we had been waiting for finally came. We had fought for years to hear this news, and we heard it. August 1945. The war was over. World War II was no more. I thought I would feel joy when I heard it. I had fought for years for this. But when the news came, I just sat down. I felt nothing. There was an enormous emptiness inside me. Fitting joy into that emptiness felt too small. The man next to me was crying, sobbing out loud. I placed my hand on his shoulder. I said nothing, because I couldn't find a single word to say. But I knew. Sometimes staying silent says everything. It was all over now. I gathered my things and said my goodbyes. I was so exhausted that I didn't even want to pack. There wasn't much to pack anyway. I put what I had into a small bag, walked out the door, and began the journey home. Then I came home. It was October. My mother was waiting for me at the door. When she saw me, she brought her hands to her mouth and tears streamed down her face. She held me so tightly that it almost hurt. But it was a beautiful kind of pain. For the first time, I was feeling a beautiful pain. I sat down at the table. My mother had cooked a meal. A real meal. A warm meal. A home-cooked meal. When I took the first bite, I had to close my eyes, because if I kept them open, I would cry. And if I started crying, I would never be able to stop. The neighbors came to visit. They said, "The hero has returned." I thanked them with a smile and shook their hands. But inside, I thought, my brothers in arms didn't come back. 8 of them couldn't come back. Why did I? I thought about that question for a long time, but I never found an answer. Maybe I didn't want to find one. At night, I could still hear it all. The sound of artillery, bullets cutting through water, the black sand, my friend's eyes still open as he died. When all of that came back to me, a strange feeling formed inside. In the mornings, I woke up, drank coffee, read the newspaper, lived a normal life. Because there was nothing else to do. Life went on. It had to go on. But I knew this. The man who went to war left his home behind. But the man who came home was someone entirely different. Quieter. tired, someone who laughed less. But when he did laugh, it came from somewhere deeper. I understood then that even a warm cup of coffee could bring happiness. I understood how much I had missed my mother's voice, how precious she truly was. The war wore me down completely. But in those moments, I learned what it truly means to be alive. The war taught me that. I was no longer the same person. Yes, that is how the war continued. And that is how it ended. A people who suffer in war never forget it. This is not a story. This is the life lived by one ordinary person in the middle of a real war. War is not only fought with weapons. You fight on the front lines, but those waiting for you at home are fighting just as hard. The strong may win the war, but even the strongest cannot always conquer their own emotions. The death of a person may seem simple, but for those left behind, life becomes so difficult. When we realize how beautiful this world is, how full of good people, we understand that wars will never create peace. We must not turn a blind eye to these lived experiences. We must learn from them and strive to live a more beautiful life. Until next time, with real stories. Stay in peace, stay in happiness, value your loved ones and yourself, and live a good life. If you want to support me, I ask you to subscribe to my channel, and I look forward to your comments. Take care.